What's good, everybody? Welcome to One Foot Down, a college fantasy football podcast. I'm your host, Chris Battistel, and with me is my co-host, Mike Haase. It is week 8. We are right around the corner from the college fantasy football playoffs. We got our plays and fades, top performers, and week 8 waiver ads. Mike, let's get it popping.
Welcome, football fanatics, to the One Foot Down podcast on the Fantasy and Frames Network. Your gridiron guides, Chris and Mike, are geared up to lead you through the thrilling world of college fantasy football. Whether we're diving into Power 5 giants or uncovering hidden gems, brace yourselves for expert insights, analysis, and daring predictions. Stay in the game. Subscribe, rate, and review. This is your 2024 source for college fantasy football dominance. Let the fantasy frenzy begin.
Mike, it is Monday, which means another fantasy football week is scheduled for us for the college fantasy football year. Before we get into this week's antics, we must start the show and let people know that there are games on Tuesday, October 15th. 3 this time. We got Troy at South Alabama, Kennesaw State at Middle Tennessee, Louisiana Tech at New Mexico State. So unlike last week where there was one game on Tuesday, this week we got 3, followed by 2 games on Wednesday, Western Kentucky at Sam Houston and FIU at UTEP. So make sure you are geared up and ready to go for week 8 of the college fantasy football season. Mike, how was your week 7?
Decent. Had some fun Saturday night. So it's turkey day over here in Canada, as we know. So having lots of family events and such, but I came home from one Saturday night and turned both those games on. So that's the fun I had this week. 2 great games, the LSU game and Ole Miss and Oregon, Ohio State. So that's what I watched. I knew those were too good to come home to, but so I enjoyed that about the weekend the most, and that they were both they went extra time too. So I almost dozed off. I'm getting older, Chris, so I almost dozed off later on. I am. And then you wake up, and all I thought was the LSU Ole Miss going back and forth. It ended pretty quickly, which was good in that game. Yeah. So that was the most content I watched those Saturday night.
Yeah, some great games. Even Kansas State, Colorado. If you stayed up a little late, we got Jamie M in the chat. Who are these 2 funny guys? Hey, welcome, Jamie. Horton is done for the season. Yeah, it's heartbreaking stuff. We bypassed our game of the week this week to actually talk about some of the devastating injuries for that happened and that are going to affect the fantasy landscape heading into week 8 and beyond as we get into the meat and potatoes of the fantasy season and into the playoffs. Like Jamie did mention, Torrey Horton, wide receiver for Colorado State, missed a chunk of the beginning of the year, came back and was putting up great numbers for us as fantasy managers that did hold on to the hope for Torrey Horton, but now he's due to miss the rest of the season with a knee injury. Some other guys that are expected to be out rest of season: tight end for North Carolina, Bryson Nesbitt, fractured forearm. He's expected to be out as well. Byron Brown could be out an extended period of time. Anyone that plays in 2 QB leagues or even 1 QB leagues, Byron Brown was one of the first quarterbacks taken off the board. He's going to be gone for a little bit. Cameron Rising is out indefinitely, quarterback for Utah. Haynes King is day-to-day. He's expected to miss some time for Georgia Tech, the QB out of there. Ja'Carry Brown is taking over as the starter at Central Florida from KJ Jefferson, the transfer from Arkansas. Graham Mertz is out for the season, quarterback for Florida. So DJ Legway is expected to take that number 1 role for the Gators. And Chip Trainium, good news, Mike. Chip Trainium is expected back, possibly for the Florida game for Kentucky at the running back position. So to cap off all that bad news, we have to put some good news on there, Mike.
Yeah, we need that.
Yeah, especially with some of those devastating losses. I mean, the quarterbacks that went down, Byron Brown, Haynes King. I mean, two of the top producing fantasy quarterbacks for college fantasy football. So that's never a good sign. And Torrey Horton, he was my wide receiver one ranked preseason for fantasy at the college level. So him going down for the rest of the season is devastating stuff because you spent a good amount of draft capital on these players, man.
For sure. Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot of wide receivers kind of hurt this year more than, I don't know whether it's probably the same if we looked at it from last year, but just like I think maybe some of the quality of receivers that are getting injured. Like I keep waiting on Nick Anderson as you were talking. Yeah. Nick Anderson, like there's others that are like you keep thinking they're coming back and they don't. And then they're out again. Like I don't think they're hurt severely, but they're obviously hurt enough where they can't give it a go. So
it's never any good. You know what that makes this a perfect ad read for. Who's that, Jamie? All right, let's get into the top performers from this past week, week 7. The top producing quarterback, Bryson Daly out of Army, 102 passing yards, 1 passing TD, 12 rush attempts, 136 rush yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, 45.68 fantasy points on the week. Still under rostered while being a weekly fantasy asset. Army is ranked, Mike. Army is the ranked 23rd ranked team in the nation, 1 spot above the Michigan Wolverines, the defending champion Michigan Wolverines. His rushing value is too valuable to pass up. He's averaging 122 rush yards per game and 2.3 rushing TDs per game. Mike, is Bryson Daly a set and forget quarterback for the rest of the season?
Set and forget. Army and Horvath, both of them, 1-2, and you're moving down to your 3rd flex spot, Jordan McLeod, and there's your hat trick of quarterbacks, just like that.
Just like
I don't know. I just made that up.
You're running the tables with those 3.
Yeah. So I didn't get Daly. I got Horvath actually in a few, and you got to start them because the running consistency is obviously there. So I'd be playing them. You'd be kind of foolish at this point not to, because both programs seem to have so much momentum going that just go for it now, because those other injuries you're talking about, a lot of quarterbacks are banged up and not performing. We've talked about them, and they're still really not even close to getting fantasy points like those guys like Daly. Cook, Green, like lots of
the rushing upside is just
gotta go.
I think he has over 100 rushing yards in every game except so it's just the production. It's too valuable to pass up. The top producing running back we have, I believe. I don't know if Bryson Daly's been on this list before, but I believe at the rest of the way, all guys that haven't been on the list. Savion Red, running back out of Nevada, 23 totes, 137 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns, 39.4 fantasy points, balled out against Oregon State, had one other game where he put up 20 points. Not an ad really in most leagues where you have to set your lineups. Maybe if your best ball leagues have waivers, you might consider adding Savion Red to your team. Of the 7 games, 5 of them he has scored 13 points or less. So he's really a boom or bust running back at the position for you. Well, if you saw my top 4, I got to go check that out, man. You should have had Daly snagged already. Yeah, I agree. If Daly is in your, most likely he's not in your league, but again, I believe he's like under 50% rostered. I have to check with that, but
like I think part of my reasoning why on that and Horvath being a little bit late is when you have so much confidence in having a good draft and having, as you know, I know Chris in the same number of leagues, I have Cook and Green with like Milroe or something. Like you have a trio of really good quarterbacks and you're late to the party at waivers. We talked about that a few weeks, not knowing, when they had their first 2 performances. So we all slept on it thinking I better see a little bit more. So we learned jump on it once they
jump on these guys. 58% rostered Bryson Daly, so he still might be available in your league. Top producing wide receiver Christian McCray from Kent State, 8 receptions, 213 yards, 3 touchdowns, 43.3 fantasy points. Started slow, but once Kent State got into conference play, McCray has exploded. 76 fantasy points over his last 2 games. Put that into a little bit of perspective for Christian McCray. Over his first 4 games, he scored 30 fantasy points. Over his last 2 games, 76 fantasy points. Mike, are we buying into the recent production of Christian McCray?
I am. I started him in 2 leagues that helped me win, but I must say I didn't predict. So I really only started him, as we talked about. There have been these few injuries in the bye weeks with so many, or so many buys, or I probably wouldn't have, right? Like waiting for him to perform. So it was by necessity I lucked out. So I can't take like some genius start on that. But the 2 I put in, oh boy, because he helped me win the week. Like I didn't expect that. Didn't expect that much. Production is what he did. So now away we go.
Production is what he did.
Yeah. So now what do I do? My question for you, my friend, is when I have like Restrepo that was on the bench on a bye, or somebody like that, who with a full wide receiver room, and you got Christian McCray, and then now you're caught. So that's going to be interesting, I feel, here on in with some of these players when I actually might have some quality guys I got to sit, and you got to sit them. If like, well, not every time, but you know.
Yeah, you're definitely going to be. Yeah, you're going to be running into some situations now with these guys that started slow, who we kind of expected to have good years at the beginning of the season, start slow, but come on now. Then what juggling are you going to have to do with your lineup on a weekly basis to make sure that you have these guys set as a starter, as opposed to going off on your bench.
Right.
The top producing tight end, Tyler Warren, Penn State, 17 receptions, 224 yards, 1 touchdown. Probably the lone spot of his game on the week was the 1 touchdown because of how involved he was in that game. I believe he had 20 targets.
Yeah.
But Tyler Warren, 37.66 fantasy points on the week.
Wow.
Overtakes Harold Fannin for the tight end 1. But Tyler Warren, Mike, where does he sit for you at the position the rest of season? Where is he on your priority list? Should we be trading for Tyler Warren if you're looking to make a push for the playoffs?
Yeah, I think it's a great point you made there. I have a little bit of Ty Warren. We knew he'd be good in that offense when they don't have a primary target wide out necessarily. So they're doing it by committee. And then you knew he was going to get, Alar would go to him quite often, but they got the 2 running backs. But as you said that in trade, he's one I would, obviously, he would go with it. We're at the point in the season, if you want to do something to kickstart, right, you got to go with hot hand. And the other one would be, since Nesbitt got hurt, go get Copenhaver, absolutely, as the second one. I was thinking as you said that. Because he should get, now he's going to have a major boost. And I wonder what he's rostered. If you see there, I can't. Copenhaver. So those 2 definitely.
Yeah.
Warren for sure. Because, what else is there right now?
Yeah, exactly. He's the focal point of what Penn State wants to do, pushing the ball downfield. And if you look at their schedule, not the greatest, though. They do have the bye this week. They got Wisconsin, Ohio State, and then they move into Washington, Purdue, Minnesota, and Maryland. So those 4 games on the back end, the playoff schedule is kind of decent for a player at the position who can put up what Tyler Warren has put up, what we've seen him put up. So, yeah, if Tyler Warren is available, if, say, the bottom couple of teams in your league that might be out or not jockeying to get into the playoffs rosters Tyler Warren, go throw a trade out for Tyler Warren and have him on your roster. If you're 5th, 6th place team, you don't have that Harold Fannin or Jack Beck on your team. Tyler Warren might be that next best guy in terms of weekly point production, just because of what his role is projected to be on Penn State. Jamie says you don't sit Xavier, you don't sit Restrepo.
Yeah, I know. It was just an example. it's an example though where when I looked at it the other day, well, after the weekend, all the games, and you're seeing where you're finishing and everything, and then you're seeing what next week is when you're planning, and I'm going, but it's tough when these guys are hot. I can think of the last couple of years, similar thing when we didn't know Wester and we didn't know Pritchett and we didn't know like these guys. Oh, I can remember. Oh yeah, if I would have had somebody like you had a tough decision if you had a Restrepo or somebody, and those guys, you missed a lot of points that they were putting up. It's the same thing now with McRae. When you do something like that, you ride that production. I don't know how. They're not easy decisions. That's the fun part of the management game of your, because I've had Restrepo this year a couple games. Like, you would like to think it's automatic in college. That's my point. I don't think as we're seeing this year, the automatic button is maybe it isn't as big of a red as it typically can be. And the production I put up a notch. I'm sounding like you, Chris. Oh my God, you're wearing off on me. But you do follow the production. Don't make it make a tough decision every now and again. It might pay off. Maybe not every time. Maybe not every time. But
keep it simple at the same time, right?
Yeah, I mean, because I try to set certain lineups though with them, and they all don't hit. So when you have a solid 4 or 5 wideouts, I watch in the leagues. If you can hit it right on, say, playing him over, that's going to win you a week. If provided your other 3 major starters in the wide receiver.
Sure, you need a lot to go your way.
Yeah, and you just play with it a bit. But yeah, I agree.
All right,
totally. Yep.
Let's get into the waiver ads for week 8. This is One Foot Down, a college fantasy football podcast on the Fantasy in Frames podcast network. We appreciate everyone that is tuned in. Drop a like, subscribe to the channel, hop in the comments. Your support is greatly, greatly appreciated. Our top quarterback ad for week 8, Spencer Petras, rostered in 6% of Fantrax leagues. We're going to touch on this player a little bit later in our plays and fades for the week, but Spencer Petras is someone that you should be looking into acquiring across all of your fantasy football leagues. The top ad, running back Tyree Walker from Wisconsin, 34% rostered in all of Fantrax leagues. With Ches Malusi departing from the Badgers, Walker has been the guy out of the backfield in the 2 games as the full-time starter. Walker is averaging 21.5 carries, 146 rush yards, and 3 rushing TDs per game. That's good for 33 fantasy points per game, where he's the RB3 over the last 2 games with him as the starter amongst qualifying running backs. So you want to make, you know what? He's an honorable mention. Avery Morrow is an honorable mention here. We only pick one for the graphic, but Avery Morrow, Colorado State, has been consistently involved in their rush attack. Over 20 carries per game. He's putting up a great amount of fantasy points week in and week out. With Torrey Horton going down, I like the Avery Morrow ad even more. So yeah, Jamie hit it on the head there. Avery Morrow, Colorado State. Make sure you follow Jamie Out of Rhythm Fantasy. They do great stuff. They're going to have college fantasy waivers as well, I believe, on Wednesday. So make sure you're checking that out. Our wide receiver ad is Ted Hurst, Georgia State, rostered in 41% of Fantrax leagues. The leading wide receiver for Georgia State, he's averaging 20.5 fantasy points per game over his last 4 games, 33 targets over his last 3 games. Georgia State doesn't have a bye the rest of the way. Rest of the season schedule: Marshall, App State, University of Connecticut, UConn, James Madison, and then into the playoffs, Arkansas State, Texas State, and Coastal Carolina. So all advantageous matchups here for Georgia State and for Ted Hurst at the wide receiver position. So he's going to be someone that you're going to want to add, because he'll be the ultimate cover for your buys, especially if you have players with playoff buys or just buys in general. Ted Hurst is going to be someone you're going to want to roster on your team. And then in the landscape of tight ends, as gross as it is, Terrence Carter, Louisiana Raging Cajuns, 9% rostered. The number 1 target for Louisiana on the season. If you're looking for, like we mentioned, anything at the position, Carter might be the floor that you need. 15 targets, 187 yards, and a touchdown. Not the sexiest numbers over his last 3 games, but his last 2 games is where he's been really balling out for fantasy managers. So if you need a spot start this week, Terrence Carter might be the guy for you.
Do it.
Do it. Just like Nike said, right, Mike?
Do it. Yep. We can use that slogan on you can use the slogan on podcast networks. It's okay.
Do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. All right. As long as we add the all right at the end, we can't get that copyright stuff. Just do it, maybe. All right.
Yeah.
All right. The week 8 buys. We got 8 teams on bye: Minnesota, North Carolina, Ohio State, Ole Miss, Penn State, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, and Washington. Now, there are some heavy fantasy hitters amongst those teams. Minnesota, you got Darius Taylor. North Carolina, you got Amari Hampton. Ohio State's got Mika Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, Quinshawn Judkins, Travion Henderson. Ole Miss has got Trey Harrison, Jackson Dart. Penn State, we just talked about Tyler Warren, Drew Aller. Pittsburgh's got Desmond Reed. Syracuse has got our boy LaQuinn Allen. And Washington, Denzel Boston, Giles Jackson, Jonah Coleman. So if you're a team that is 8th, 7th, 6th, 5th, these are great weeks to try to steal a win, because most likely these top of the range players are going to be on these teams that are competing at the top of the standing. So this is a great spot for you to steal some wins. So make sure you're paying attention to players not being dressed late inactives. Follow us, follow Fantasy and Frames. Try to follow the community of college fantasy football content creators, and we'll make sure we get you set up for the week, because these are pivotal weeks for fantasy players, and week 8 is a very advantageous week for you. Tulane D in replace of Minnesota D. You playing a lot of leagues with team defense, Mike, college level?
You know what? I'm trying to think. No.
I played a couple. Played a few. It's not really of the ordinary, but I mean, I don't play in any IDP. You play in any IDP college leagues?
No, I can't. I don't think.
I'm in the same boat. All right, Michael. Let's get into our plays and fades for week 8. We're going to fire it off with the quarterbacks. First, we mentioned the play at the top of the waiver ads. That's Utah State quarterback Spencer Petras. Started in only 3% of leagues, rostered in only 6% of leagues. If you watched him this past week, he struggled a bit in the first half of that UNLV game. Utah State only put up 7 first-half points. In that first half, Petras, 151 pass yards, a fumble loss, 2 interceptions, and 9 rush yards. Turned it around in the second half. Utah State made some great adjustments in that second half. He threw for 310 pass yards, 3 passing touchdowns, finished with 31.44 fantasy points, which was good for QB 11 on the week. Utah State is the 10th ranked team in pass attempts per game. And that is because of the guy that is under center. When you look at what Utah State was doing with Bryson Barnes under QB, they were averaging 26.3 pass attempts per game. With Spencer, 47.6 pass attempts per game. Under Bryson Barnes, they averaged 157 passing yards per game. With Spencer, 375 passing yards per game. Now, this is about 3 games each. So the sample size for both draws a very different contrast in how Utah State wants to move the ball with both of these guys under center. With Spencer Petras, they are throwing the ball through the air. Now, UNLV, the stats behind what he put up might be a little bit skewed because they did have to play a lot of catch-up ball. UNLV was up big early, and Utah State had to come back and kind of, try to get themselves back into that game. Which, for fantasy managers, you love that kind of stuff. When I saw they were down big at the half, I was like, all right, small setback, great comeback. And that's exactly what he did. This week, Utah State draws the New Mexico Lobos, a team that allows the 95th most passing yards against per game at 249.4. Opposing teams are averaging 46 points going up against New Mexico. New Mexico also doesn't create a ton of pressure either. They got a 3.68% sack rate percentage, which is not great in terms of getting to the quarterback. So quarterbacks are allowed to stay on their feet when they play against New Mexico. According to PFF, they got 112th ranked pass rush defense. So it's not looking good for New Mexico's pass rush. Petrus is a must add. The opening odds, Mike, guess the opening odds to this game, the over-under.
The over-under to that game is going to be 67.5.
78.5 total points.
I'm close. That's not that far off.
78.5 total points expected to be scored between Utah State and New Mexico. So Vegas is expecting a ton of points to be put up in this one. He's a must-add the rest of the way as well. I know Jamie in the chat saying he just can't trust Utah State, but New Mexico, Wyoming, then the bye, and then a barn burner matchup against Washington State. Their playoffs, they got Hawaii, San Diego State, and Colorado State. So great rest of season schedule set up for Utah State and Spencer Petrus, Mike.
Right. Yeah, sounds good. So Dampier is New Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's another challenging thing. Like you probably going to have to
Dampier.
Put him in the game.
You got to start Dampier.
And if you have someone like, again, we keep repeating ourselves with some of those top guys, you got to put them in. Because, I mean, go with that over-under and trust that because that number, typically in college, once they get up above the 60, they usually hit it. It's all the time. Like, they don't rarely predict a game in the 60s, high 60s, low 70s that it actually gets pretty close to reaching there, unless it's horrible weather or something crazy or something.
Yeah. And if you look at what Malik Williams just did against them this past week, he was another, QB1 performance for Malik Williams out of UNLV, a quarterback that utilizes his legs, can throw the ball, and be a threat for fantasy purposes. So you're starting. If Royals has $150, then I trust their passing. Well, Royals a dog too. I mean, he's been putting it on since Petrus has been named starter. So, Mike, we got the play for week 8. Who's the fade?
Yeah. Wow, So these numbers aren't good that I looked up. I'll just say that. Like these numbers so I kind of had a little time to think about the 4 players I'm talking about tonight, the one at each position and this particular player, trying to look at the pattern of the last 3-4 weeks and looking at the data over those weeks. You're making a decision, yes, for this week, but we don't have a lot of time left to make a decision, and you may continue to make this decision because it's crunch time if you're just out of the playoffs hunt or whatever. And looking at Nico Lamieva's numbers and what we don't know what is going on in Tennessee. I think we're all like I watched they had such momentum in those first couple weeks. And then it's just kind of all, we get, Sampson's back there running, and I think they're going to, Sampson and the other young running back in behind him, they're just going to go with them if the passing game isn't there. Because the data is now supporting this 0 TD passes the last 2 games. Like 0? Really? Nico, that is tough. And prior to that, and also the last 2 games, 7 sacks against, which I don't like that measure. It doesn't seem like too much, 3-4 sacks, but it is with a scrim. He's not either. He's hurt a bit, banged up a bit. He's not scrambling like we know. I think we talked about that one of the other weeks. If that's not there, and you're not trusting the improvised plays that we like to see out of all these guys we talk about in college, it's going to hurt. He's not throwing for 200 either yards. So 4 straight games. He's not throwing for 200, all under 200 yards. Every arrow is pointing down for him, and his rushing too. He does rush 7-8 times, sometimes 9 times. There's on average, but he's not getting to 30 yards really. He had one light up game of 60 some yards. The rest, he's down at 26 and 23 and 30 or whatever you have, and no scores. So I'm sitting here going, well, it's not a no-brainer that a guy like this, we speaking of it, we like to give them opportunity when we know the pedigree of that player and seeing how electric they look early. So I think it's time to pull back. We've talked about some other weeks to pull back on it until they prove it again, or your fantasy team will be out without making these tough decisions. So tough decision time is coming for most of these players. So when you have Bama's pass rush has been looking better lately, creating some turnovers lately. I just don't like what's going on there, and they're bullying their opponents. We didn't see that early on from Bama. They now, that a wake-up call, as we know that they got. Now it looks like they're gonna get bullying a little bit again. And if they get back to that consistently, man, it's just not a good matchup for Nico if his confidence is not where it needs to be to run that full offense. So I think you'll see them run, obviously. And they've been doing a better job of that than the past.
And he was a bit of that fool's gold player at the start of the year too. They played Chattanooga, NC State, Kent State, Oklahoma at the start, Arkansas, and then Florida over the last two. They got Alabama, like you mentioned, and they go into bye. So then they're going to ask you the question, Mike: is Nico a drop for fantasy managers, like not C2C managers, not college fantasy, just fantasy redraft, because they got Kentucky, Mississippi State, Georgia? UTEP's probably one of the more advantageous matchups of them all, and then Vanderbilt for the fantasy playoffs or the fantasy championship weekend, because he doesn't utilize his legs like we were hoping. Is he a drop for you?
Yeah, the only way I keep him is if I'm deep at the position with the other few. We're in a couple of those leagues. But sometimes if you have 4 or 5 quarterbacks and they're there, you can put them down there to see, but that's a tough schedule. So now that you mentioned that, I'm like, wow, you can if you have enough depth there, but if you aren't confident that you do, that's one of those hard decisions. Like, you got to drop for these teams that have the playing weaker schedule, weaker conference, and looking at those matchups now. So you got to take a look. It's really only
the two matchups that I'd want to start Nico in. It would be the matchup first Mississippi State and the matchup first UTEP. The matchup first UTEP, as of right now, they're 44-point favorites. So those are pretty much the only two games from here on out I'd want to start Nico. And looking at those 2 weeks, I can probably find a better option at the position. So I would say in redraft leagues as of right now, he's a hold, maybe just a hold, not a direct drop, but I would say it's safe to drop Nico in college fantasy redraft leagues, man.
Right.
All right. Let's get to the running backs, Michael. And you, of course, about time you picked a fighting Irish player in one of these.
Well, I do like a few others now that I have looked through, and there's a few, but we're trying to pick different. We're not trying to have repeat players picked week to week. That's what's making it challenging with all the buys. And then now we're where we're at to not pick the same player. So you're going through all the matchups. You're trying to find somebody in the rankings you give.
Yeah, start Ashton Janty. We're all starting Ashton Janty.
And everything.
Matchup doesn't matter.
We're trying to find stuff. Find that the same dark horse player we're not picking. But I like how Jeremiah, we expect more. So again, my strategy this week and where we're at, when I sat and thought about it, I'm like, he's getting around, it's always around 11 carries, 12 carries. It doesn't seem like a lot. I think that can be boosted. There was the one injury to his teammate. His other teammate in the backfield there sharing the room is doing okay too, but not getting quite as much as Jeremiah. So when I look into it, the downside to this is I would want to, as a fan, I don't like seeing Riley Leonard run it all over too much. If they can tone down his running and give a bit more to Jeremiah Love, now that it will be crunch time, I think they'll boost it a bit. Maybe he gets to 15. That's my hope, 15 carries. So that he can maybe score twice. So he's scoring almost every game. So these things are that's good, but we're trying to capture the next production, the production where you you go off 1 week and you can get this thing done. He's at 426 yards for the year rushing. So I'm just interested if Riley Leonard can have a downward arrow in that component. And this is from perspective, he needs to pick it up passing, or they're not going to be, they might make the playoff, but they're not going to go anywhere in the playoff if they can't balance this thing out. So I'm basing this on an overall boost for Jeremiah. He has about 20 receiving yards, per game. It's not bad. And there's a few catches. So I'm trying to hope that he can pick it up from there. He's at 60, 75 yards. Like, he's almost at 100 yards. There's other players we've talked about like this. This is part of my strategy. I like to get them when they're producing, and you only need a little more bump from them that will help you win some weeks, and to get consistent. Get him to the 100-yard mark and 2 scores in those weeks when you have, and it's got to happen. It's just, I think the biggest point again is repeating that it will be if Riley Leonard isn't scrambling so much and calling the plays to love. Like, they got to slow down a little bit back there, call more plays for these guys, because they're talented group, as we know, the Irish. Most of them give them a shot. So I thought I'll throw them in there. It looked like a good opportunity. The receivers, I wouldn't know who to pick anybody out of the mix on anything. So I would say
good luck picking a Notre Dame receiver.
Man, I don't even know. So this is the player I would key in on, which isn't a shocker. I mean, we all know he's a talented guy, but let's just give him the reins a little more. Like, you see a guy like Sampson and everything go off what we talk about. Give him a little more here. Let's see. So that's my hope.
Some leash.
Yeah.
All right.
Because I play him and start him.
We're playing Jeremiah Love with the hope that Mike's juices gets him going.
Just because I like that he's he's right around those 15 touches. Let's just see if they can, I will text. Yeah, I'll text you. Just like, he doesn't need to be major bell cow, but come on. Can he be the cow in the cowbell?
Yeah.
I mean, I just made that up. It actually was really lame. Like, that was lame, eh? That's what happens when you are old, as Chris says.
Too much turkey, Mike. Too much of that dang turkey, Mike. All right, the play is Jeremiah Love. The fade is the guy playing on the other side of the field in that game, Jamal Haynes. Georgia Tech looked great over his last 2 games against UNC and Duke, 128 and 170 rushing yards respectively, but UNC and Duke are the 95th and 96th ranked defenses in opponents' rushing yards against per game. Prior to these 2 advantageous matchups, Haynes was averaging 3.94 yards per carry. Didn't have a game where he rushed over 100 yards. Only averaged 3.12 yards per contact, and had 7 total runs over 10 yards across the 5 games. A little bit of what he did over the last 2 games. He had 7 of those 10 rushes over 10 yards over the last 2 games. Averaged 7.2 yards per carry and had 3 TDs, one of them being a receiving TD, his only receiving TD on the season. And he looked great against UNC and Duke. But like Mike mentioned, this week, Haynes gets the Fighting Irish. Notre Dame gives up the 40th most rushing yards per game at 121.3. On the road, they are surprisingly better. Notre Dame allows the 11th least rushing yards per game, allowing only 92 rush yards per outing on the road, on the ground. So we are not expecting Jamal Haynes to have a game like he just had over the last 2. No running back has gotten over 100 rush yards in a game across the season against the Fighting Irish. Georgia Tech is going to be without Haynes King this week, and they are projected to go with Zach Pyron. We're not sure what that's going to look like for Georgia Tech throwing the ball, but we know that when they got on the goal line, Zach Pyron came on to kind of big body the ball into the end zone. So he has 4 rushing touchdowns on the season. That might spell bad news for Jamal Haynes even more if they do get down into that goal line territory. So for me, it's just not a great matchup for Jamal Haynes. You probably want to start Jamal Haynes against those good matchups like teams like UNC and Duke, who aren't good against the run, but against teams that can stop opposing running backs. Jamal Haynes is not a start for us, and he's not a start this week against Notre Dame, Mike.
Yeah, I have him in a number, but prior to the year, he was really at a great end of the season last year, and that was because of the passes out of the backfield. So I don't know now when you're talking Haynes King out, it'd be interesting to see how the play calling for him.
Yeah, because Zach Parton's going to rush the ball as well, right? That's part of why they bring the copycat QBs in. They're not going to have this prolific passing quarterback, a system that utilizes rushing quarterbacks behind a rushing quarterback like Haynes King, right? So I just don't think that they're going to be able to move the ball that much against or all that well against Notre Dame, and they're not going to get into a position where they're going to be able to score a whole ton. So I'm not firing up Jamal Haynes this week.
Yeah.
Jamie says Raiola is 10 fantasy points behind Nico, which is nuts. I thought Nico had more fantasy points. Nico top 81 fantasy points to Raiola, who ranked 91st. Which, yeah, hey, Nico struggled as of late. That first start of this schedule was awesome. Jamie, what's up, Jamie? Thanks for tuning in to the show. Did you guys know there's an NFL game on? No, man. There's no NFL game on right now. There's college football on tomorrow, Jamie.
The MFL.
NFL? What is that?
The Monday.
The Newfoundland game?
Yeah. We know that's on.
Yeah.
But we've learned this works very well for our schedule. We do pretty well half just after. You get to catch the second half, but you get to plan your whole college, and you got to do it on Monday night.
That's it.
Because of all the games. We don't have a choice.
Games start tomorrow. Yeah.
Do it.
Calendar starts tomorrow, baby.
The pressure. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Let's get to our wide receiver start so we can get to this NFL game that's supposedly on. I don't know what Jamie's talking about. The wide receiver start for week 8. Wide receiver plays Jace Brown. Kansas State going up against WVU. The leading target for Kansas State, 35 targets, 398 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the season. He has come on as of late, averaging 21 fantasy points in his last 2 games, scoring 3 times in those 2 games. The wide receiver 13 in fantasy points per game over the last 3 weeks. The wide receiver 36 in his last 3 games, averaging just over 16 points per week. He's going for 3. He went for 3 targets in both of his first 2 outings. So he wasn't involved in the Kansas State pass attack too much at the beginning of the season. Right. In his last 3 matchups, he was a big part of what KSU wants to do. 8 targets, 5 targets, and 9 targets. He's had 1 outing of over 120 yards in those 3 outings. In his first 3 games, his A-dot was 10.1 yards. In his last 3 games, that A-dot has jumped up to 14.5 yards. So that's a difference of 1.6 fantasy points per target to nearly 2 fantasy points per target over the last 3 games. This week, he gets West Virginia, a team that allows the 80th most passing yards against per game. Slot receivers have found great success against the Mountaineers, averaging 12 can't even speak right now, Mike. 12.5 fantasy points per game. We've seen Luke Grimm, Jalen Noel, Dwayne Lofton in the only game where he was relevant. We even saw FCS wide receiver Seven McGee, formerly of Oregon, have one of his best days going up against West Virginia. The game opened at 53.5 points, but has shifted to 54.5 points. So that's telling us that people are putting their money on the over in this game. Kansas State are 9-point favorites over West Virginia. So that is why Jace Brown out of Kansas State is a start for us this week.
Yep, totally agree. Nice, good player, nice player, waiting to pop. Like, this is what we're trying to pick. We're waiting to have some of these guys increase their targets and production, and this will be the time they do it. Obviously, I mean, it sounds whatever, but mid-season, get on a roll and stick with it. Because if they don't, these teams won't be, their playoff hopes and what they're doing will be gone. So either find your go-to guy is what I'm saying now. So let's hope for that. Yeah, there's college tomorrow, Jamie.
It's 3 games, Jamie. 3 games, brother. There's a Wednesday game too. Wednesday game.
Two of
games on
those.
Wednesday.
A couple on Thursday. Maybe.
You better get something to drink. Oh,
Drink,
man. I'm sick, Jamie. I'm trying to pull this one through as best I can, brother. College question. Besides Beck, which QB can the Browns draft early next season so they can ruin their career? Oh, Mike, that one's for you, man. You're a Browns fan.
Oh, this year, like, I don't even, it's like this year is just, if they don't get Winston in there for all, we'll answer this NFL question. They better. But one quarterback, what did I read? I don't think it was Cam Ward. They were looking. There's which would be a good fit if there's somebody like that coming in.
They're probably going to draft Curtis Rourke.
Yeah, they actually, Shadur Sanders. So that's what I had.
There's no way Dion's going to let Shadur Sanders go.
So this is, they're going to draft Shadur. Well, Shadur's going in the NFL draft next year. Oh, you don't think he's going to let him go? Yeah.
Deion Sanders already said he ain't going to let Travis Hunter or Shadur Sanders go to just any team, man.
Well, thanks for the any team comment. No. Love it. No, but I did read on the weekend they were talking about that somebody Watson could get traded somewhere just as and then cut, like, to get the money, recoup the money back, get the pick back, like move the money to a team that has the ability to get them that are under the cap, that need to get to any form of the ceiling of the cap, that can release him without, like, don't even want him. You have to give the compensation and so on, and then figure out that secondary trade to jump up and get somebody like Shadur. So that, I mean, they craft all of these wonderful things in La La Land, but that being said, in Cleveland, they develop these things up, right? So yeah, I'd go DTR. I saw in there they got DTR.
They should just pack up and move the team again, man.
Yeah, just get on a bus.
Did you see the CBS video today about the Browns players? No, I gotta check that out. Jamie. All right, we got the play. It's Jace Brown from Kansas State. Mike, who's the fade?
Yeah, the fade, a player we both like, and this year too. He's had a couple boom games, arrow up games, Malachi Fields. So it's matchup based for me. Going to Clemson, which can be a tough place to play. Play decent on both sides of the ball. I hope I don't, this doesn't come back to bite me because he had 17 targets, but he only caught 9. So about half. So there's a completion issue there. His numbers would have been awesome this last weekend against Louisville. It would have been Warren-like numbers, 129 yards, but no scores. So I started looking at past weeks, and he was only averaging about 4 catches the last game, 3 games prior, and around 60 yards a game or so. So that's like, yeah, he's in the game plan. He's there, and his other boom game was prior to all that. So, like, you want more. He got in the end zone a couple times, but why I picked this is I just think this weekend, if he goes to that average, or if they stuff it a little bit more, Virginia, his number won't be very good. They have a good wide receiving core. We know Owens, Presley, spreading it around. I just think, can they do that in Clemson and spread that around, or focus on one guy that will help you in fantasy? I think they'll spread it around. Like, how else are you going to beat Clemson? A tough place to play. And I think part of this for me is, and Clemson running, I think the possession arrow and the time management arrow should go to Clemson at home like that, and running Maffa and Glubnik's been running and doing all sorts of things. I think they'll hold the clock there. I just don't think Virginia will have enough time on their hands here to run and get these guys solid numbers for the week. That being said, you never know. College is funny in certain ways. If their game plan is hang in there with them, hang in there. Could be lower scoring, right? A tougher game, but not where we need it to be fantasy wise. So the 4 for 60 and hoping he scores. I don't know. I thought maybe sit him this week. Maybe he's a fade and wait for a better matchup down the road to put him back in the lineup. Yeah. For example, we talked earlier tonight, if he had the Krishan McCray, and he's on a roll, play Krishan McCray. Like, that's like, you do that, even though Malachi Fields is, heck of a receiver, but that's not what we're picking. We're not picking just players with talent. We're picking guys with talent that are getting us numbers. Yeah. Which you tell me all the time, Chris.
Yeah. Jamie says, is it a catch problem or the QB fault? How many of those 17 targets were drops versus catchable targets? So it's a great point. If you look at Calandria's completion percentage, 64.1 completion percentage, I'd have to look a little deeper into his deep ball percentage, and where Malachi Fields lines up. It's a great question to ask, but Calandria hasn't been the best quarterback in terms of delivering the ball to his wide receivers.
Right.
Dr. Barry.
Fade
everyone except the Big Ten and the NFC North. NFL is the new NBA with these contracts, he says. Yeah, it's getting to the point. But, I mean, if it's not one of the players that are playing the games, then who is it going to go to? The guys that own these teams, and they got enough dough as it is. So,
right.
I mean, the players at least I think should be getting their fair share of the cash. All right, let's get into the tight ends, Mike.
Ooh, the tight ends.
The fade,
close
you
the
got
show.
The play.
Yeah.
I mean, start Harold
ends.
Fannin, start Jack Beck, and then roll the
everyone
dice
else.
Everyone else.
Because I got
who you got?
I got a beauty.
You got a beaut. She's a beaut, Clark.
He's like he played North Carolina, I'm pretty sure. And then, when Nesbitt came up, the dual tight end threat there in North Carolina, they used them, and the Kamari Morales, they did a good job. And then Copenhaver, that was such a good pick for them. They brought him into the program, bumped out poor Kamari. He's been in college for 19 years. He has 3 degrees, and he's been there for 19 years catching ball. I'm kidding, but he's been there for, I think, if you look it up, maybe it's a 6th year. So just a veteran guy that I think last week I'm going off the hot hand. So my thing when I read this, he was 5 for 5 targets, 5 catches, 77 yards and a TD. And he's been used in the red zone. So he might not get volume, but if they build on that, that's why I would say make this pick, make the gamble. He's 44th right now, and nobody has him. He might be 4% owned or something. But they're leaving him in the program. At Boston College is a team, they're not throwing the ball all over the yard in a high octane offense, going for it. So I find he has a little spot in the offense in the red zone. Most targets are there, a few targets a game, 3 TDs, not bad. 13-yard average, not bad. So I'm just looking at a weak tight end stuff that we're looking for each week. It's a low risk thing if you're finding in there. You don't want to trade for somebody and lose, as we were talking before, lose some good players to get one of the higher price guys. If you just want a little waiver thing and you have to fill in because you have a lot of guys on buys, maybe take that. But his average pretty good. Virginia Tech's low 104th or something against the position as well. So I thought, well, it's quite low. Red zone guy, they are using him. It's consistent each game. It might not be a lot, but boy, if they can build on that, maybe he's got a go-to guy on 5. Why not? I think he'll do it again, wouldn't you? It's you do that one week, go for it again. Maybe it won't be 5 for 5, but if it's 4, he catches 4 balls and they're 13 average and he's in the end zone. Hey, you might be all right. You know more of the numbers there in the tight ends about what they're averaging in the ranking, where they're playing. After your free.
Yeah, I like the play. Dr. Barry says Cade Yakimelli is the best DFS value. You know who that is, Mike?
Cade Yakimelli.
Yeah.
I think he plays for I think he's the backup tight end for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers up here.
No.
Oh, no.
Running back for the Wisconsin Badgers.
The Badgers, yeah. Oh.
Okay, listen to these stat lines, okay? Best. We don't play a lot of DFS. I don't play a lot of DFS.
Yeah, no, brother.
I know last game he had that big run. Last game, 4 for 72, 18 yards per carry. The game before that against Purdue, 5 for 39 and a touchdown. Then against Alabama, 8 for 39. So DFS, probably because
you're only buying. Yeah, he's like $200. He's like they're paying you to. They're paying you to put him down in there.
Exactly. So there's good opportunity that he has these big games. So
it hurts us because we cannot do that. We discussed this. Heck, Chris, it seems like last year, but I think we discussed it in episode 2, how it pains us that we can't really get in to do that. We have everything else, but we can't. Yeah, because I enjoyed it back before we had all of this here. We could get into there in some of this in the state, but
gambling was cool when it was illegal, man.
No.
Cal's tight end to shine over the last few weeks should be a hot play. Yeah, Jack
Dykes
Endries.
Endries. So Dykes though and Endries, but Dykes has the dual designation. So we talked about
Endries. Touchdown and over his last two, 15.3 and 21.9 points.
I like
Jamie
Fernando.
says, happy Canadian Thanksgiving. Thank you. Appreciate it. Prop plays are the best plays. Yeah, I know. I don't play enough props. Mike always texts me.
I do. Yeah, I text you
bets, and I was like, man, I got to get in that, but I just never get into it. I should. I do enough research on this stuff that I should get into it. Make some.
Well, what I normally pick, and I think is the absolute safest when you're doing the props college, which I do some. So I did win one Saturday night. I had LSU on there. I'm trying to think, but I had 3 or 4 winners of games, right? And you pick. I don't do much. I might play something to win $50, play $5, win $50. But if you're doing props for the players, wide receivers, I obviously stick to for the college. Everything else can be a bit of a, target. If you surely know those WR1s that are WR1s, just attach yourself to those and don't make it complicated of any guesswork or who's going to do what. Really hone in, because there's so many teams. If you can hit 5 teams that are true WR1s that are getting those targets, keying on them, pop some overs on there, slap that down there you'll get a win back. There you go. That's my advice.
Dr. Barry, do people actually draft for college fantasy leagues like they do for the for the NFL and the USA? Absolutely. Man. And you can make it that's what we are, a college fantasy football show, and you can customize it. You can go Big 10, you can go Big 12, you can play it just SEC, you can do whatever you want, man. It's fully customizable. He says Canada is weird. Canada is a little bit weird, Barry.
Weird. No, but we get Barry, the concept of this is C2C legacy leagues, which gives you the best of both worlds, which we are in. And when you draft this player as a freshman, do you know how exciting it is? And I happen to have this player, a few teams, but not enough. Everybody fought over him. And Jeremiah Smith, picking him now, you get him forever into your NFL league. You get him from college if you so desire, and you keep him going into the NFL. And that's Chris has helped many leagues with us manage and show us this concept that we're just blown away by how awesome that is. Like, really. And if you can hit that guy, Jaden Daniels is the guy I talked about at length, that it happens to have worked out for me. Real concept. Yeah. But you get him in college, you use him in a college fantasy team, he bumps up to your NFL team, and
good to go, baby.
Willing it to go, and you get him for the whole thing. So, yeah.
He says he's joining, and forget I ever mentioned KD Akamelli. He sucks. All right. So the play is Mari Morales, and the fade is Brant Keithy from Utah against TCU this week. Keithy's been mediocre, Mike. Tight end 6 in fantasy points per game on the season, being propped up by his 2 big 20-point outings, averaging on the season 12.63 fantasy points. True average, 6.85 fantasy points. Still sees a healthy amount of targets for Utah, only the 1 touchdown on the season. TCU has been terrific against opposing tight ends. The position has been averaging only just over 4 fantasy points per game against the Hypnotoads. TCU allows the 17th least amount of passing yards against per game on the season, 11th least over the last 3 games. Utah just lost Cam Rising for this season and will pivot to Isaac Wilson. Wilson has a 55.7% completion percentage on the year, 7 yards per pass attempt. 43 of his pass attempts come below the sticks, so he's not really moving the ball downfield. Could set up for a nice situation where Keithy sees a good amount of volume, but the volume just won't be fantasy impactful. He could see 10 targets, catch 6 of those targets, and only go for 44 yards, and put up less than 10 fantasy points for your week. So if you can pivot somewhere else, possibly Kamari Morales, you're going to want to do that this week from Brant Keithy, Michael.
Yeah, we like that player. Like, there's a typical player we keep naming. There'll be many of these players that will play Sunday and will be good, but they're just, this year's a funny year. We thought some of these players would be, right? Like automatic, like a guy like the automatic and big numbers. So they may throw 1 week, and then the rest of the time they're like Fields, as I said, the wide receiver, same issue. Yep.
All right, let's recap this bitch. Week 8 waiver. Go ahead, Mike.
Nope. Spencer Petras.
Yeah, week 8 waiver ad, Spencer Petras, running back, Tavy Walker, wide receiver, Ted Hurst, tight end, Terrence Carter. Our week 8 plays, quarterback, Utah State, like we just mentioned, Spencer Petras, fade, Nico
Lamileva.
Sure, I'm gonna let you. Yeah, you know what Jamie does say? Utah doesn't have a wide receiver one. He's right. They don't have a wide receiver one. Brant Keithy is the wide receiver one. But what's the wide receiver one going to be on a team that just lost their starting quarterback for a quarterback that doesn't really complete too many passes? He's not going to throw the ball a ton, and he doesn't really stretch the ball downfield. So, yeah, you got a point there, Jamie. But
and that defense will key in on that fact that he's your blanket go-to guy. He's gonna get like blanketed in my I would, like, if I'm the coordinator on the other team and this has happened. Yeah, you're gonna take him away now. Like,
our running back play, Jeremiah Love, fade Jamal Haynes. Our wide receiver play, Jace Brown, wide receiver fade Malachi Fields, and our tight end play that we just talked about, Kamari Morales, and tight end fade Brett Keefe. Mike, anything left to talk about?
College football tomorrow. Came across the chat. Like, yeah, this is shocking. This is every day there's college football. Every day is a new day from here on out. They're hardly off.
Yeah, I think it was. We had 55 straight days of football. So last week, starting Tuesday, we're lined up for 55 straight days of there being at least one football game on our TVs. Nice. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, tomorrow we got Troy at South Alabama. So we got Devontae Ross, Gio Bernard over there. Yeah, so Kennesaw State, Middle Tennessee, Holden Willis for Middle Tennessee, their quarterback, Nicholas Vattiato, who just had his best outing for fantasy managers. And then at 9 p.m., Louisiana Tech at New Mexico State. Not too many fantasy relevant players in that one, Michael.
Right. Get some early points.
Yeah, I was supposed to do waivers. Yeah, I know it's not easy. Yeah. And then Wednesday, Western Kentucky, Sam Houston, and FIU against UTEP. Right. And then we move into Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday.
Right. My strategy always is, as you name that. So one of the closing things to say, jump in and play one or two through the week in some of these matchups when the conferences are a little higher scoring to try to give you a bump, like to jump out into the lead. Don't go crazy and play as many in all of these matchups, but try in those key positions to jump in for a little boost and then wait to the weekend, because when you miss them, it hurts. Like, you go to Friday and you're trying to crunch your matchups in Friday and Saturday morning, and you realize, oh no, these guys went off during the week. So just take a quick look. Throw in a couple. I always like to just throw in a couple if that matchup's right. The scoring is there, and it'll be that bonus for you just to give you a boost to start the week instead of missing that opportunity.
All right.
That sucks.
Yeah. I mean, week 8's here. Week 8, 9, 10, 11. And then we're pivoting, getting ready for playoffs, baby. So the season, we're in the thick of it, but man, it's almost over, Mike. It's almost over, man. We still got some weeks to go. All right, brother. That's the show. We appreciate each and every person that tuned in, everyone that jumped in the chat, Jamie, and Dr. Barry. We appreciate all of you. John McGlynn was in there as well, I believe, saying what's up. That's it. Week 9 next week. Fantasy and Frames has the waiver show tomorrow. Dynasty 365, Fourth and Frames, and Shoot the Gap on Wednesday night. So make sure you're tuned in for all your NFL fantasy stuff. And then going into Sunday, they have the show to get you ready for the NFL slate of games. Yeah, so starts and sits, trade questions, everything you need to win your week. Fantasy and Frames has got you covered. Yeah, Around the Ice as well. They got the NHL show, JT Brew and his crew. He's got the college football betting show as well tomorrow. So, I mean, content, there's a slew of it over here at Fantasy and Frame. So make sure you're getting what you need to get you ready for your week. For Mike and FF Mike H, I'm Chris Battistel, and we'll see you week 9. Doodles.
Take care.